Welcome to Math Actually, where we focus on teaching tips that truly add up. And let's be honest, every math teacher has had that student who shuts down and says, I'm just not good at math. And then they check out completely. But what if we had practical, compassionate strategies to bring those students back in? Today, we are joined again by Gaspard, educator, coach, and math whisperer, who's going to break down exactly how to spot the root of a student's struggle, differentiate without burnout, and rebuild student confidence when it's running on empty. I'm excited for this episode because it is full of real talk, real strategies, and real encouragement. So let's get into it. Thanks for joining us again, Kat, on this Math Actually podcast. We're so excited to have you back. And today I want to talk a little bit about when students struggle. We know that not every student walks into class loving math. So what I want to do is kick this conversation off with this simple question. What do you think teachers can do to reach those students who struggle or just feel stuck?
Okay, that's a fantastic question that is age old. We have, my gosh, even as adults, how many people do you ever hear that say, oh, I'm not a math person, I don't like math? So I was on an airplane once, and there was a woman sitting next to me, and I struck up a conversation with her, and she asked what I did, and I said I was a high school math teacher. And she looked at me, she goes, oh, there's a place in heaven for you. And I said, hard. And then my joke is nowadays that when people ask me what I do, when I used to teach, I said that I was a dentist because I felt like I was pulling teeth all the time, right? So I literally dedicated a lot of my career and a lot of my research into supporting students that have a fixed mindset and don't consider themselves math people. And so one of the things I think that's kind of a good starter for teachers is, and this may sound obvious, but get to know your students. But I'm gonna take that a step further, right? And say, you've got to set up like a survey, right? And because you need to find out how you can hook them. The reason that they don't love math, they've never felt it as a purpose. They've never felt connected to it. They felt a failure at it, right? And so if you get to know them, then that gives you that information to make that first personal connection and give them a hook and a reason, right? And then within that, again, providing tasks that we call floor to ceiling, but which really means that there's so many ways that students can participate at different levels that in the end, everyone feels like they contributed something. And maybe you hope that they feel a little smarter because that's you're in, right? But then also comes the environment that we talked about in our last podcast, that it needs to be safe. It needs to feel like communication and making mistakes are okay. And it also needs to feel like the teacher gives up what we've called in research the mathematical authority. They don't always have to be expert and say if everyone's right or wrong. You can invite other students into the conversation to just share ideas and see what other students think about it. Now that, again, requires a task that maybe has students reason and make a decision between things so that there was, I think, too, and just supporting them when they're struggling and not just giving them the answer, showing them how to do it, right? But maybe asking some questions and letting them know that it's okay. Or again, when I think about the 5 practices, when you're going around and monitoring and you're looking for different levels of understanding, you could find those students that are maybe stuck or struggling, but yet they got to a certain point. And maybe you ask them to be part of the beginning of this conversation and then encourage them to follow through with the students that will finish off the problem. And then, you say something like, well, then you'll be able to see maybe one way you could have finished this, and then it takes a lot to develop their trust because no one wants to feel stupid, right? Yeah. And that's what really is happening. By the time you get to high school, they just shut it off. Nope, I'm not a math person. And so that's even a tougher one to crack there, the fixed mindsets by the time they get to high school. And so patience, supportive communication, and letting students know that it's okay to struggle and it's okay to be stuck and to persevere, which of course is a math practice standard.
Of course.
So,
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I think teaching them all of those things, I think you hit on an interesting point, because you're right. I think when students feel safe when they come into your classroom is important, like we talked about in the last episode. But I also think, like you had said, it's that if we build that rapport or that relationship with them where we have gained their trust, I think that's so important, because if students know that they could trust you, then they're going to hopefully, theoretically, feel comfortable enough to make mistakes in front of you, right? It's because they know that you're not. I think you're right. I think once you hit high school, or our students hit high school, it's like they do not want to be embarrassed. They do not want to be wrong. If they're in front of somebody who's going to constantly tell them that they're wrong, then they're just going to shut down. But if they're in front of somebody who is openly saying, hey, it's okay to be wrong, and I'm here to help you on your journey, and you can trust me. I'm not putting you down. I'm here to be your mentor, or I'm here to be your math mentor, whatever it might be. I think it can change the game. I know for me, this is just a weird thing, but I know in my classroom, I set the environment intentionally. So when the kids come in, they're just comfortable because of where they are. So one thing that I do, I have soft lighting, things like that. I hit the main lights. They come in and it's almost like they're at a Starbucks. So they're comfortable when they enter the room. Now, I know not everybody's that's just my style, but when they do come in, it's almost like when they walk into the room, a weight's been lifted, they're relaxed, and now I can proceed to teach with that relaxed atmosphere. And then gaining their trust along the way has helped me open doors for a lot of my students, which I think taps into what you're saying with that relationship building is so important.
No, lighting is what a unique thing to bring out. I love that. I've seen really great things with, not like that with lighting, but with around the room, and it flashes or it dims and things like that. And people use music. And so, I would love to be in your classroom, Jack. That would be a really great experience to see it all happen.
But that was good. I think humanizing this situation is probably the best way to go, which then got me thinking of this. I will be honest with you. It is a word that when I hear it, it drives me a little crazy, because we hear it so often, which is the word differentiation, right? So we've heard it's time you have to differentiate. And when I hear this often, whether it's I'm being told we need to differentiate in our classrooms or we need to differentiate in our lessons, we're often told that, but there's never a way that anyone says, well, here's a simple way to do that. And then in my brain, it's like, okay, if I have to differentiate, this is now going to take hours of my life. It's going to take multiple preps for me to figure this out. So I guess my question is, let's talk a little bit about differentiation, kind of leading from that last question. What is your favorite way or any way that you would consider to be a simple way to differentiate without doubling your prep or taking so much time that it just gets frustrating?
Well, I agree that differentiation makes me kind of shiver if you think about it in that way. Like, you have 20 some students in your class, or maybe 40, and you can't address personally each one. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's a simple way to differentiate, but I think it takes a rethinking of what differentiation means when you have all those different types of students. And it really starts with, I hate to say it again, but a great task that it allows students different levels of understanding. It can't just be that where they get, X equals 7, right? So it first has to start with something there where the teacher then knows certain students that she or they could support, right? So as a monitor, you're grouping students in your mind of like, okay, there's this common misconception that 4 students here have. You make note of it, right? You make another observation about some type of thinking or level understanding amongst maybe 5 or 6 others, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you come back and you have that whole class discussion, there's where, if you purposely sequence what you see when you're monitoring, I believe that will kind of fill in the blanks. Now, of course, I'm not talking about IEP's 504s. Let's be clear on that.
Yeah.
That takes a whole different level of planning and accommodations to make sure that those students have the opportunities that the others do. But, in terms of learning styles, right? And I really think it all begins with the task and then the teacher monitoring and sequencing purposefully so that you could actually scaffold and start that whole class discussion where you make the mathematical point anyway, right? Things that you saw, and you start off with the first level and then grow from there. And they're continuing to watch. And at the end, right, you have some graphic organizer or something, and where you could sum it all up, right? And then that's also a checking for understanding. You can actually have a follow-up question at the very end that leaves you as the teacher with a sense then of the different, confirming the different level of understanding for the whole class, which then you could take with you into that next day to help you differentiate, right? And by differentiate, I mean, even in terms of grouping students together to support each other in terms of where you still saw some misunderstandings.
Okay. I like that. Yeah. No, that was good. And I think that's very useful because I think sometimes we don't necessarily think about it that way, right? I think that as soon as that word comes out, a lot of people just the ears shut off and, because it can be so time consuming. So I really like how you broke that down, because that could not only save time, but it makes sense in how to approach differentiation. All right, great. I do agree. Differentiation is important and it is key. And again, like I had said before, I really like everything that you said about it and the way you laid it out. I do think sometimes when we differentiate, we do so because, going back to the previous questions, we have struggling students and we want them to have a little bit more confidence, right? So we will differentiate sometimes, we'll strategize for students to give them that confidence. So my question is, how do you help students build confidence when they've checked out of math?
Got some good questions, Chuck. That's a tough one. But if you think about building students' confidence, we will do that by getting them engaged and getting them to talk about math, and then talking groups and talk with the teachers, right? And the more that they talk and share and feel acknowledged and valued, their confidence builds. So then I go back to, okay, if they've checked out, how do I get them to check in? How do I get them engaged? How do I get them talking and communicating? Well, if it's someone that's checked out of math, it can't be about math at first. It's like sort of scaffolding. Instead of scaffolding the way we think about it mathematically, it's socially. So how do we get them to just talk in a math classroom at first? And a lot of teachers have heard what do you notice? What do you wonder? Or which one doesn't belong, but nothing having to do with math. It could be Takis versus hot Cheetos versus Doritos. What would you rather? And they get into this conversation, and students that never piped up in your math class will just all of a sudden have expert opinion on all of this. And then we're hoping that when you transition to math, that will be upheld. And they'll keep chatting because of the comfort that they felt originally with just talking about something that was a lot safer than math. And it also requires teachers, when they do that kind of that slow transition from not talking about math to talking about math, think about the questions that could start to ease a student in that never really does participate. So meaning just to jump right to, well, what'd you get? Explain to us, got it. Not even what's the first step. It doesn't even have to, why not use those same questions? What do you notice? What do you wonder? Has that first question about the math problem.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? And there'll be some type of transfer. And then about just patience and the time it takes for those students to feel that success, and then when they are talking math to not be shut down. And even if they make a mistake, acknowledge them for, thank goodness, value and input you get from those students. Make sure to have those fun opening conversations and even allow those students that have checked out to pick the things that everyone's going to talk about and what would you rather the next day. Give them some ownership in the communication in the classroom.
No, that makes sense, especially on things that they're interested in, because that's going to spark everything. So I like that. Yeah, I like it. So then I guess I'll end this episode. I like to try and end the episode tying it a little bit back to Reveal Math specifically. So I want to ask you one question about Reveal Math. And my question there would be, what role does error analysis play in the program? And then how can teachers use it more?
Well, I really appreciate how error analysis shows up throughout the Reveal Math lessons as part of the teaching for understanding, because that's it's an important piece for students to be able to critique others' reasoning, which is a math practice standard. I think it's a huge, important role. And I would say that it's also used, I've noticed, in some of the Explore, it's even in some of the homework questions. It's really spread throughout. And please, I would definitely suggest do not avoid it. I think it's one of the best ways to help students analyze thinking. And I really think, though, that how teachers could use it more is with their own assessments. So McGraw Hill does a very good way of modeling it in Reveal Math.
Yeah.
And so the teachers could take and write it themselves maybe, or have a fictitious handwriting of students so that they couldn't recognize, but use from their assessments. So all the different mistakes that students made, and then of course the correct answers as well, and the different ways that students have solved it. Again, which years for teachers to files and keep all of those mistakes and misconceptions. That would be a great way to help students prepare for an assessment after the first year, using Reveal Math as well.
I agree. I like those simple strategies, like compiling together and working out the problems that are probably the most confusing and doing that together. That, again, gives them the ownership. And that's the key. We want to make sure that we can have that as part. So I love it. All right, great. That kind of wraps up this particular episode. Thanks again for all of this valuable insight that you've been able to give us. But I'd just like to say thanks so much for coming on now. And I can't wait to chat about our next topic.
Great. Thanks, Chuck.
That's it for episode 2 of Math Actually. But before we go, let's hit the Math Actually recap from this episode. So here's your quick takeaway list. Number 1, spot the why behind a student's struggle, because behavior is a signal, not a summary. Number 2, differentiate smarter, not harder, with rich tasks that offer natural entry points for all learners. Number 3, rebuild confidence through safe social entry points like which one doesn't belong, or even notice and wonder. Number 4, use error analysis as a classroom superpower. Student mistakes can drive deeper understanding. And number 5, include every voice, inviting struggling students into math talk without ever putting them on the spot. So now it's your move. Pick one strategy and try it this week. You don't need to do a total overhaul, just one intentional step forward towards connection and clarity. And remember, good math teaching isn't about doing more, it's about doing what matters most. See you next time on Math Actually.